Functions. So functions are the pieces of code that get executed when it's called. For example, you take a print, it's a function, max, it's a function, min, it's a function. So for all this, like print, every time you want to print something, you have to call that function. And for max, if you want to say pick the maximum of 2 elements or 3 elements, you have to explicitly call that function. So the code within those functions will only be executed when they are called. Now, why do we need functions, right? Let's say there is a requirement where you write some code and then you write another code trying to find out the greatest of two numbers. So this is that code that we write, right? And so after that you write some other code, then you do some other calculations, and after that you want to re-execute the same code. So what do you have to do? You have to write this code again. So the code is getting replicated. When I say replicated, is the same code is been written multiple times. This is where function comes into play. So what we do is the same code, we put it in a block and we call it as a function. We just give it a name. So there will be only one such code, and then we will call that code whenever there is a requirement. So if let's say if I want to execute this piece of code, I would just call the function. So this is like code reusable. This is where function really helps. Now that we have understood the purpose of function, let's create one function. Syntax is this: you have a def, that's the definition, then you have function name. I'll call my function as message, and I'll just print some message here. So it's a very simple function. So I'll execute this. Now if you see, I have executed but it did not print anything, right? So the reason is, in order to execute this function, in order to execute the code within the function, you will have to call that function explicitly. And how do you call it? You just give the name and then just run it. So I have given the name and just entered, and it has executed all the code present in that function and given me the output. So that's how we create a function, a very simple function. We created a simple function with a simple print statement, and then we have called this function, right? So let's make it a little complex, little complicated. It's not really complicated, but what we'll try to do is we will include this code within this function, right? So I'll call this function as greater, because it has to be identated. So I'll move it a tab. I'll execute this. Now I'll have to call this function. I'll call it says b is greater. Now we have explicitly mentioned the values of a and b here, right? So but we can also pass this as arguments here. So let's remove this here, and I'll pass these arguments here, a comma b, and then you pass the values here. So when you do this, 20 will go to A and 30 will go to B. It all depends upon the order. So if you give a comma b, the first value will go to a, second value go to b. You can also give b comma a. In that scenario, the first value will go to b and second value will go to a. Right now it's a comma b, so a will be 20, b will be 30, so b should be the greater. So let's go ahead and execute. Error, probably I have not executed this. Let's execute this and then execute here. Okay, I forgot to execute this, so you'll have to shift enter, execute this, and then you'll have to execute this. So now you have to call it. So basically b is greater. Right now I can pass another value, let's 200 to 300, and then it will be a greater than a is greater. So that's how you use function. Let's write another function. This time what we'll do is we'll write a function to add two numbers. So I'll take a comma b, a, and I'll say print c, right? Now I'll call this function 12 comma 3, that should be 15, right? So instead of printing this here, you can actually use another statement called as return. So what return does it will return the value back to the one which has called. For example, we have called this here, get all the code, and then it will return the value right here. So let's catch that value. So c value is written here, and so we will catch it here. We'll say let's say k equal to and 12 comma 10, so that should be 22. Let me execute this. Okay, now if I execute this, so what happened is sum of 12 comma 10, right? So it executed all this, it took a plus b and stored in c, and it has written the value of c. So that c value has been captured here. So if you do a print of k, you will see the value of c, right? So this would be very useful when you want to catch something from a function and then you want to use it in some other place. So for example, if I say I want to do k into 2, I want to use it in some other function, so you can do this thing. So this is the importance of return. So this was a pretty simple one. So you can write functions within a function. Let's create another function, a simple function. I will say message function 1. I'll write another function, let's say message 2. Function 2. Now I'll write another function called as message, right? So what I'll do here is from this function I will call the other two function. I'll call message 1, I'll call message 2, right? So now I have run this. Now what I'll do is I'll call message. So what happens when I call message, right? So it will go here and it will execute, then it will call this function, right? When it calls this function, it will print function 1, and then when it has executed all the statements, which we only have one statement, it will go back here, and here what it's trying to do is trying to call another function called as message 2. So it will execute all the statements, so you'll get function 1 and function 2 just by calling message. There you go. So you can call functions within a function. Now look at this function, right? So I'm trying to find the greater of two numbers. What if I want to find the greater of three numbers? This function will not work, right? What if I want to find the greater of four numbers or five numbers? Now if I want to put three numbers, I can put another function and I'll call three. I'll give three arguments, and if I want to get for four, I'll have four arguments. But that's not right? You can't keep on adding functions, right? So for handling such scenarios, we have a special variable, it's called as args. So what, see the star before it. So what this means is you are not sure how many arguments you are going to pass, but it will going to take all the arguments here. Now this is a variable name, so whatever variable name, you can give any variable name and just place a star in front of this, and that will mean that you can give any numbers of argument. So let's try to create a function like this. We'll try to mimic the max function, right? So max function, how does it work? So if I give max of 1 comma 2, I'll get 2. I can also give max of 3 numbers, right? I can also give max of 4 numbers or 5 numbers or any number of numbers. It will just go through all of them and it will give you the result, right? So let's define that function. I will call it as maximum, and I'll take args. Now you can give any name here, variable name. I'm just taking it as args. Now just to show you how this is going to work, I'm not going to write the entire logic now, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to just print. Now passing these values, right? So all these values will be stored as a tuple. So how do you iterate to a tuple or through a list? Using for, right? So what I'll do is for, I'll take a variable a in args and I'll print it. Just to show you how args works, I'm going to execute this and I am going to call the maximum function, right? So we pass maximum function. So what it does, it will be, so it will iterate through this function. So it will take 1 and then it's going to print, then it will iterate other the second number, it will go and it will print this. So let's say if I give y comma 7, now see the order here, they'll execute in the same order, right? So this is a concept we are going to use. So what we'll do is we'll take a variable greater and assign it to 0, and I'm going to update this variable with a maximum value. So I'll do a if check. How this works is it will take this value and it will check with the greater value. So let's say greater is greater than I, the value that you pass, then your greater would be this same value as greater. This should be greater. So you are actually assigning the same value. Else, if that is not the case, the number that you have passed is greater than the one that is here, then you are going to override it. So let's say 1. So greater is greater than I should not have taken this greater. Okay, so 0 is greater than 1, so it is false, so greater value will be 1. So next time what it will do is it will your I value will be 2, so this will be 2. Now greater value will be 1 because previously we have updated that. So 1 is greater than 2. No, so the greater will be updated with I. So that's how it works. So I'll execute this, but I'll execute this, right? So right now, although the function executed fine, I did not get any output because neither I have printed it nor I have written it. So what I'll do is I will return the value of greater here. Execute this. I will capture this in A and then I will print it. Python is case sensitive, so I have used capital letters instead of small here, so I should be using small. So let's play around with this. I'll make changes to the arguments. Okay, 15, so I'll make it 200. That's about function and how you can use it and how it's going to help you in organizing your code better or reusing the code in a better way. So hope this was very clear to you, and keep practicing, and we will see in our next lecture.